So I got this Dana 30 front end I'm putting together for my flat fender. It broke a couple teeth off the pinion and kind of put some gouges in the housing. So I've got them V'd out, cleaned. I'm gonna preheat this thing and weld this one gouge up and then see how it turns out. So that housing ended up being real thin and it actually burnt through when I started to weld it. So I ended up welding it top and bottom. Made the weld on the top a little bigger than it needed to be and kind of worked it back and forth and burnt out any of the impurities. And then there's the bottom side. I'm gonna knock the weld down a little bit on the bottom side or the inside and leave the top side alone, and then kind of deburred and cleaned up any other gouge marks. So looks pretty good. Gonna finish cleaning this up and it'll be ready to install and start building. So super happy how this turned out. Got the weld all ground down. Doesn't appear to be any pinholes or anything in there that's gonna cause any problems. And the top side just wire brush the weld. I'm gonna leave that alone. So I think it's ready to go. I'm gonna spray it out real quick and shoot some paint on it. She'll be ready to go in and start building. I ended up not having to, I'm not gonna silver solder that or anything. I think it'll be just fine. I think it'll work just fine. Pretty successful day today. So I got this axle fixed, the big gouges inside from the broken pinion gear. Got those all fixed. And then I got a whole bunch of stuff wire brushed. So I had an extra set of knuckles, so I've got one of those left, but got 3 knuckles done, the front backing plates, the wheel hubs. I did a couple extra spindles, the axle shafts, all wire brushed and ready to go. So I'm gonna shoot some paint on this stuff tomorrow, degrease it, shoot some paint on this stuff, and it will be ready to go. Like I was saying earlier, I keep all the shims and baffles and that kind of stuff. It'll just help me get measurements to set up the front axle when it's all the new parts are going in. So I was going to show you real quick how to use this Yukon puller to pull bearings off of the carrier and the pinion. So I went through the contents of the front axle when I was taking it apart, and there was shims and a slinger under the inner bearing cup. Besides this slinger on the pinion, the combination of the 3 of these is the pinion shim depth. So I need to pull this off. I can measure it without pulling it off. I just want to pull it off to make sure there's no other shims besides this slinger under here. So I'm gonna show you how this puller works. On these shorter pinions, sometimes you run out of stroke on the puller, and especially with mine, these are no longer adjustable. I need to get a new piece here, but so I use a couple spacers. So I put the couple spacers on there, the puller, the clamshells, and you want to get the smallest clamshell that will grab the bearing. And make sure you don't flip them. I've done that before on accident. It will end up busting the bearing, and you have to cut it off, which is not any fun. And then I need the collar real quick. So then the collar. is going to pull the bearing off and allow me to get to that slinger and any shims if there's there any. There's the slinger, no more shims. So the 3 of these, I'm gonna get a new slinger as close as I can to this thickness, a baffle as close as I can to this thickness, and then these additional shims is gonna be my starting point for the new pinion depth. I'm gonna save those. I also saved the carrier bearing shims from the side that spun. No, it's not going to give me 100% accurate measurement, but it's a starting point. So I'm going to save those. I always mark the ring gear side with 2 zip ties. I'm going to go ahead and pull this other side, and I'll mark that with 1 zip tie. And I also hung on to the pinion preload shims. Some of these are kind of rough too, but once again, it gives me a starting point, so I'm not taking it apart 50 times. I might only have to take it apart 3 or 4. So to pull this, you need an adapter. So you're gonna put this adapter in the carrier. My little tip keeps falling out. And then the same thing. So, got a little stack of shims. I'm gonna mark these with 1 zip tie, and that will help me get a starting point for the new carrier. And this is all junk. The pin was wallowed. There's chips in the spider gear. The ring gear's chipped. The pinion, these are match set ring and pinions, so the pinion's junk, the ring gear's junk. So all this is going in the garbage. And I was gonna go over a couple benefits to this type bearing puller. It's safer, so it uses these clamshell cups. There's not jaws going over and hooking the bearing that can come off. You can see there's a couple casting divots here for a jaw type puller. You have to use an insert similar to this in the center, and then a 2-jaw puller. You do have to use those sometimes, like on 10 bolts. This type puller doesn't like to work on GM 10 bolts very well. Every other one, some 8.8s with aftermarket carriers, it doesn't like to work too well. But other than that, thing is usable. The Yukon puller is usable on, I'd say 95% of your differentials you're gonna encounter. So I hope that is helpful, and I'm gonna move on, get some things cleaned up around the shop, and get back on this project. So I got the old workhorse fired up, the old MIG Master 250. And I got these backing plates. There was some grooves in them from the shoes, so I welded those up. Just like one spot on that one, and one spot on that one. So those are all done. And then I went through and welded up the gouge marks in the housing where somebody had cut the pads off and welded new ones on, and had to fix all that. So I'm gonna take this outside and grind it. The front housing is currently sitting outside drying. I got it all painted, and I'm gonna bring that in and then grind this one, clean it up, figure out where the spring pads are gonna go, tape that off, and paint this one. Making some progress on the 3A. I got all the backing plates painted, and I painted the knuckles. I painted an extra set of knuckles I had there too. And then this morning I pulled the steering gearbox off this 2A chassis. I'm actually gonna redo this pretty much all stock. So I'm sending the steering gear down to my buddy Rob in Tucson. He's gonna go through it. Rob at Willys works. I'm sure I could rebuild this, but he does these all the time, so he's gonna do it for me. So there's the steering column, the steering gearbox, and the side plate covers over there. So I'm gonna wrap all this up and send it down to him. And what else do I got going on? Oh, Cj3a. I've got almost all the parts cleaned up for that. I gotta kind of knock the big stuff off the case, but there's all the gears getting done.